That day, Ron Weasley's scream could be heard by almost the entire castle. Afterwards, facing a humiliated and indignant Weasley's questioning, I had to shyly express that I had been scared speechless, which was why I hadn't screamed. A joke! Ever since I had become an adult, there hadn't been anything that could scare me into screaming so loudly. After that, Weasley and I became closer. Experiencing a danger together truly is a good way to foster friendship. He now always excitedly speculates why there was a three-headed dog hidden in the castle. I just listen, nodding from time to time, pretending to be participating. I knew I would come face to face with the Dark Lord at the end of the term. Therefore, I tried every possible way in my daily life to reveal that my combat talent was excellent. This was undoubtedly very difficult. In Professor Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class, in the midst of the strong smell of garlic and that sickening odor, no one could concentrate on the lecture, let alone pay attention to my skills. It seemed only Malfoy was an exception. I even began to consider that if Dumbledore or the other professors still failed to notice, I would prepare to find an excuse to have a fight with Malfoy. In the midst of this hustle and bustle, Halloween Eve had arrived before I knew it. Bats flew across the ceiling of the Great Hall. The feast was abundant. Everyone was full of laughter, which meant my mood became extremely terrible. The gloomy Harry didn't maintain his usual shy appearance, just sitting there, not eating. Amidst a group of happy feasting Gryffindors, I looked very conspicuous. I knew that even if Dumbledore saw me today, he wouldn't be suspicious. I raised my head, scanned the staff table, and unsurprisingly, I did not see Professor Snape's figure. At this time every year, I, my other self, would be staying alone in the dungeons. The doors of the Great Hall were slammed open. Professor Quirrell rushed in, looking wretched, and shrieked, "Troll! There's a troll! In the dungeons!" He struggled forward a few more steps and then collapsed. There was a moment of silence. Then several hundred children screamed and fled panic-stricken towards the door. Dumbledore had to raise his wand and shoot off a piercing explosive sound before the terrified children quieted. "Persits, immediately lead the students back to the dormitories," Dumbledore said. "Follow me. First years, don't get separated," Percy said immediately. My expression darkened. I remembered. On this night, my other self, had been ordered to go to the 4th floor to check on the three-headed dog's status, but was set up by Quirrell and got bitten. As long as I, in this body, could get there in time and cast an Alahomora, I could help myself. "Harry, where are you going?" Weasley asked in a surprised whisper. I paused, suddenly turning back to look at him. "Wait, where's Granger?" I remembered that last time the trio had been found in the girls' lavatory. Weasley froze, remembered something, and his face suddenly turned pale. "This afternoon, I think I made her cry. She's still in the girls' lavatory." Damn it! I decisively changed direction and rushed out, not forgetting to instruct, "Go find a professor. Tell them about this. I'll go find her." In my heart, I really wanted to curse that Granger. All right. I actually wanted to curse myself more. How could I have forgotten Granger? Originally, I thought it was the Potter trio that went looking for the troll adventure. The lie Granger told last time was truly hard to believe. So I thought that this time, as long as I didn't bring those two, I wouldn't run into the troll again. I hadn't expected things to actually be this way. Now I could only let things develop just as they had in the previous life. Although my other self, would get injured, as a Hogwarts professor, I, in this body, couldn't, knowing the situation, be completely indifferent to a student's safety. Damn it. If I get injured, I get injured. I've experienced it once anyway. The only thing I could do was to quietly bring myself a dose of Murtlap essence afterwards, I thought resentfully. Merlin grant that I still remembered which girl's lavatory it was last time. From far away, I heard a female voice screaming, and also an indescribable foul stench spreading through the air. I drew my wand and abruptly rushed in. A huge, ugly brute appeared in my line of sight. The small brown-haired girl was hiding under the sinks on the far side, letting out helpless screams. "Shut up!" I hissed coldly. I rushed in and directly cast a series of levitation charms, making the fragments and rubble from the lavatory all fly up and hurl towards the troll. I did not forget to say the incantations aloud, nor did I forget to control my speed, so as not to cast the spells too fluently. "Get over here! Quick!" I yelled at Granger. Those fragments couldn't inflict any real injury on the troll, they could only delay him. But the girl seemed terrified and just kept curling up further inward. My face tightened, my expression grim. I quickly ran towards her under the cover of the flying rubble, my movements extremely agile. Then I grabbed her arm and, allowing no argument, dragged her running outside. The troll let out a roar, swinging his giant club and smashing it down. The fierce sound of wind whistled over our heads. I quickly pulled Granger, lunging out of the lavatory. And where we had just stood was a crater smashed by the troll's giant club. I didn't say another word, just grabbed her, turned, and ran. "Harry!" Did she seem to recover, calling my name with a tremble? "Run first," I said concisely. I glanced at the troll chasing us from behind, a trace of annoyance showing in my eyes. Why isn't Professor McGonagall here?
Having no other way, I could only drag the Granger girl and try hard to run towards the first floor. I knew very well that last time, my other self, had only arrived after the other professors. Counting on myself was unreliable. "Granger, I can run by myself." Granger, a little embarrassed, signaled for me to let go. I nodded. Thankfully, when we were halfway there, we ran into Professor McGonagall and Quirrell, who were rushing over. With no time for words, Professor McGonagall took a sharp breath and went forward to meet the troll. Quirrell, however, started to me, "Oh, truly terrible, Potter. Are you all right?" My face instantly turned pale, acting as if I was only now realizing what I had just gone through. I immediately lowered my head, anxiously biting my lip. "Harry, are you all right?" Granger immediately realized the Harry before her was Gryffindor's shy boy, and she asked with concern. A bit frightened in retrospect, I squeezed out a small smile for her, just as I saw him arrive. Professor Snape, in a rare sight, was not billowing his robes, but walking over with a limp. His expression was very unpleasant, and his sharp gaze fixed on me first. "Look who it is. Oh, Potter, were you so impatient to find the troll planning to throw your little life away?" I lowered my head and said nothing. I knew very well that my other self, was currently furious about being injured due to Quirrell's scheme, and just at this moment, he received news that little Potter was in trouble again. He had to go to great trouble to protect this child, yet with just one lapse in attention, the little brat, me, was almost torn to pieces by the troll. This was simply adding fuel to his anger. I had no defense for myself right now, but he became even more furious at my lowered head and complete lack of self-defense. It was just like punching cotton. In the meantime, Professor McGonagall had already dealt with the troll and walked back, her face clearly demanding an explanation. "It's not like that, Professor Snape." Granger mustered her courage and said. She blinked, telling the exact lie she had fabricated in the previous life. "Really, if Harry hadn't protected me, I might have already." Because of this, Professor McGonagall cast a gentle and gratified gaze at me. My gaze swept over his leg, and then I saw a trace of blood. How about tomorrow, while he is not around, I go to the office to help him brew some wound medicine. This time, I couldn't let myself endure the leg injury and brew wound medicine every day. As if sensing my stare, he immediately glared viciously at me and abruptly pulled his robes to cover his leg tightly. I knew what he was thinking. He could imagine Dumbledore would definitely praise little Potter's bravery again, that the child wasn't truly weak and shy, that he still remembered to protect a classmate in the midst of danger. This narrative would only make him tired and annoyed right now. The next morning, I waited until Professor Snape, had finished a class and left the dungeons. I slipped away from the Gryffindor common room and went to the potions office. It was empty. In his potion brewing workshop, I found the few vials of wound potion he had started. Using the ingredients I knew he kept, I quickly brewed a neat full row, which would be enough for him to use until his leg injury was completely healed. I also prepared an extra large cup of pain-relieving Murtlap essence. I checked the room carefully several more times. Apart from the missing ingredients, there were no other changes. The potions, of course, were perfectly usable. It was as if someone with good intentions had deliberately taken advantage of his absence to silently make wound potions for him. I knew he wouldn't believe such a thing, but he would use them. I left, ensuring I was seen by no one.
After Halloween, the little witch Hermione drew close to Weasley and me. It had once again become the trio for my memories of my past life. Regarding Granger, I was originally resistant. This little witch is very smart. If I kept her by my side, it was very likely she would discover flaws in places where my disguise wasn't perfect. But I suddenly discovered that after Granger appeared, those things that originally required me to guide Weasley to deliberately discover all became things that she guided. In other words, for Dumbledore's little games, Weasley would be careless, but Granger would keenly discover the clues, think about the phenomenon, and advance the entire process. It saved me the effort, which was simply far too convenient. Several months had passed since the start of school. I believe the image I had crafted was already believed by everyone. A shy, introverted Gryffindor boy who could, however, muster his courage at important moments. This would undoubtedly make Dumbledore much more relieved. The weather had taken a sharp turn, becoming extremely cold. The trio had changed into thick cloaks, wrapped in scarves and wool gloves. We were now hurrying towards the dungeons, passing through a corridor where the cold wind howled. Everyone had a miserable expression about having to go to the low-temperature dungeons for class on such a cold day. I had originally long been used to it, but I forgot this body belonged to the delicate 11-year-old Harry Potter. So when I sat down in the dungeon and couldn't control my shivering, I gritted my teeth. It wasn't that I was unwilling to discreetly cast a warming charm on myself, but rather, himself, the current Professor Snape, had already fixed his eyes on me. Oh, Potter, so you already know the content of this lesson. Is that why you're shivering? He walked towards me, his voice low, and deliberately carrying malice. Malfoy and the others laughed in low voices. The little Gryffindor lions mostly shivered in fear at his words. Ever since Halloween, he, Professor Snape, had constantly worn this foul expression. I knew he probably just wanted to deliberately find fault and dock points to vent his frustration. Of course, Professor Snape would absolutely not dare to think that about himself, I thought dryly, but this didn't stop him from finding fault with me. Did your ears accidentally get swapped with a mandrake, deliberately provoking a professor? Gryffindor loses 1 point. His feigned malice slowly turned into anger, and his tone also grew cold. I could see my own face was frozen to a pale bluish white, and I was constantly trying hard to suppress my shivering. As usual, I acted too cowardly to meet his gaze, aggrievedly biting my lower lip tightly, not saying a single word. He must have been furious. Facing such a child who was unlike Lily and unlike the elder Potter and only resembled a perpetually frightened, abused child, he seemed to completely lose the mood to find fault. He spun around abruptly, robes billowing, and returned to the podium menacingly. And for the rest of the lecture, he didn't spare another glance in my direction. "Are you okay, Harry?" Weasley asked in a low voice. He knew I was very cold just now, and having just been scolded, my mood must be extremely terrible. "No," I said, thoughtfully feeling the warming charm that was now active on my body. "I feel pretty good right now." "Are you kidding?" Weasley's eyes widened in surprise, his expression perplexed. I was non-committal. In fact, I felt this sensation of being protected by himself was extremely wondrous, although it was just a casual warming charm.
Halfway to the classroom that afternoon, the trio was blocked by an older Slytherin who then slowly announced Professor Snape's latest punishment. "What? At?" Weasley's eyes widened, asking half a beat too late. His wooden, stunned look was just like a troll's. "But Harry didn't do anything," Granger recalled disapprovingly. "Harry just didn't answer his question. In any case, a week is too long," Weasley nodded indignantly. But I, the subject himself, didn't look angry at all, but rather wore a thoughtful expression. "Mate, say something," Weasley looked at me. "I don't know either. Maybe he just can't stand the sight of me." He just can't stand the sight of me. Of course, that was impossible. I knew he, my other self, wouldn't suddenly give me detention for a week for that kind of reason. There must be something else. Was I discovered? Did I reveal any flaws today? I could only bid and Bruley farewell to my two friends after dinner and head towards the dungeons full of worry. "Goodbye, Harry," Weasley said with a choke and the tone of someone speaking to an old man on his deathbed. "He will come back alive, right?" "Don't be silly, he's just going to detention with a professor," Granger jabbed him disapprovingly. "Just a professor?" Weasley muttered in disbelief. "That's the most terrifying old bat in Hogwarts." The sound of them arguing faded into the distance behind me as I walked away. After more than 10 minutes, I finally arrived at the familiar door in the dungeon. This was the office I'd lived in for decades. Medusa was coiled on the door, dozing lazily. I wasn't sure if I should try saying all the passwords he had said, or if I should just knock honestly. "Professor Snape, I'm here for detention," I said, knocking. The door opened quickly. That familiar figure in black robes was glaring down at me, eyes fierce as if plotting something. I couldn't help but flinch slightly. Heavens, did I, my other self, always look like this when looking at people? From a student's perspective, it was really a bit peculiar. He, Professor Snape, took a step aside. I walked in and on my own accord sat down on a stool at the side to wait. But after waiting for a long time, I was still not given my detention task. I looked up in confusion and saw myself, Professor Snape, was standing in front of me, wearing an expression like he had a toothache. That kind of conflicted expression, with twitching cheeks. That must be a toothache, right? "Potter." He seemed extremely reluctant to say the following words, but had to force himself to speak. "Your detention content for today is to stop making yourself look like a troll that's about to faint at any moment." I blinked very slowly. "Pardon? Did I mishear something?" "You did not mishear." His lips twisted, his words turning into an impatient hiss. "Now, put away that look of foolish timidity on your face. Do it." I stared at him woodenly. "Very good," he said dryly.
"In the future, don't let me see you bowing your head when others are speaking to you, or showing that kind of foolish expression again," he hissed. Has he really gone mad? I also wanted to show that conflicted, toothache-like expression, but I didn't dare, and I also couldn't use occlumency, so I subconsciously and concealingly lowered my eyelids again. "Disobeying a professor's words, Gryffindor loses 1 point," he said coldly. He tilted up my chin, suddenly bent down and drew close, looking imperiously into those emerald green eyes. Before I could frantically look away first, the pair of green eyes in front of him flickered evasively and looked to the side. "What are you afraid of? Why are you hiding?" He sounded suddenly furious. "Look at me." I pursed my dry lips, awkwardly shifting my gaze back and met the familiar black eyes in front of me. I could even see my own pair of green eyes reflected inside them. Those were Lily's eyes. When Lily smiled, this pair of green eyes was bright and beautiful, very warm. But now, this pair of eyes on my face had become as if covered by some haze, no longer crystal clear, with complex emotions hidden beneath a dull green. I, my real self, didn't dare to look at this pair of eyes anymore, because I had tainted this shade of green. Thus, he saw, in that familiar pair of green eyes, withdrawal and bitterness. This inexplicably shook his mind. He released me and regained his composure. He must have realized this didn't seem to be simple shyness. The emotions that had just flashed in those eyes were very complex. He paused, looking at these eyes. His voice really couldn't remain cold. He could only say dryly, "Stand straight. Don't cower like a little thief." Only after speaking did he notice he was still tilting my chin, and I had been obediently holding my face up according to his strength. He immediately let go. as if he had touched something disgusting. I immediately lowered my head again, but then obediently stood up straight. Merlin, I never knew that honing my acting skills in front of myself was even harder than facing Dumbledore. If I didn't lower my head soon, my real emotions would be seen. But in his eyes, it was just that my fragile and sensitive self-esteem had been wounded by him again. He must have felt that what little patience he had left was about to be devoured by regret. What madness had possessed him to actually want to straighten out such an abused child Potter? But since he had decided he had to bite the bullet and continue, he took a deep breath, forcing himself to continue giving commands. By the 4th day of detention, he probably felt that this little troll, me, might be salvageable. Although in the first 2 days my withdrawal and fear had nearly worn out his patience, starting from the 3rd day, my behavior improved a lot. I consciously started standing up straight, walking with big steps, and no longer letting a fearful and timid expression show up on my face at all times. It was just this habit of keeping my head down and not making eye contact when speaking to someone that I still couldn't fix. "Look at me. Do not make me repeat myself," he said again. "You are not a house elf. Making eye contact when speaking to someone is basic courtesy. Are you incapable of understanding?" I watched the familiar figure in black robes stand in front of me, glaring intensely, yet having to restrain his venom and anger, afraid of scaring away all my courage. If any student outside knew of the scene, they would surely gasp in shock. When did Hogwarts' most terrifying old bat learn to be considerate of others' feelings? But I was also very helpless. I had no choice but to reluctantly raise my eyes, gaze at those black eyes again, and restrain myself from looking at the eyes, my eyes, reflected within them. My shyness and timidity were all an act. I was suffering more than he was. After inexplicably turning into this little brat, I hadn't even sprayed venom once. When I wanted to walk with robes billowing, I had to make myself shuffle in small steps. When I wanted to spew vicious words, I had to try my best not to speak. When not using occlumency, fearing I would reveal my emotions, I just kept my head down and pretended to be timid. Now he had gone mad for some reason, suddenly wanting me to change. Damn it, change into what? Into someone arrogant and conceited like the elder Potter?